Welcome, everybody, to the fourth episode in our Europa podcast. I'm Jack.
I'm Noah.
And for anybody that doesn't remember or hasn't been here with us for the first three episodes, our podcast is taking a look at the portrayal of alien life in pop culture and comparing and contrasting that with what we see on Europa. One of the moons of Jupiter that has a strong potential to host life and just a really interesting planet overall.
Well, moon, not planet.
Oh, sorry, it is a moon. Some people think of it as a planet, but it really is technically a moon.
Right.
In this episode, we're going to be looking at exploring Europa and how we're going to find more information about it and kind of what exploration is going to look like for Europa.
So starting off with how space exploration has been portrayed in pop culture, first of all, we have Interstellar. In a story in which people went in search of a habitable planet, they flew through wormholes so that they could travel really, really quickly. And I think as far as like interplanetary exploration is concerned, one of the biggest concerns is time, especially with manned missions.
Anytime you go into deep space, you run into that like time factor. Like even to go to Mars, people would have to be in the, in their spaceship for like, not quite a year, but several months.
Yeah, getting there. And it'd also be really hard for them to come back. And that's part of the plot of Interstellar is Matt Damon's character, whose name escapes me at the moment.
It wasn't Matt Damon.
Wasn't it? Yeah, it was.
It was Matthew McConaughey.
No, Matt Damon. Not Matt Damon. Wasn't the lead guy, but he was the guy who they went to his planet because he said it was habitable. He hit the switch saying it was habitable because he knew that if they said his planet wasn't habitable, he'd never be found again.
Oh, you're right. I don't remember that movie as well as I thought I did. In Interstellar, they kind of solved the issue with manned missions by just... The crux of Interstellar was that they needed to find this habitable planet, and the thing that made their mission possible was there was this wormhole over by Saturn, and so they could actually fly through the wormhole and cover a large distance very, very quickly.
And they also had cryosleep, which enabled them to put their bodies into stasis for long periods of time.
Right, and so that's what allowed them to travel so far so quickly, and unfortunately we don't have technologies like that, which really makes manned missions to these outer planets and moons very difficult.
Right. And another big theme in Interstellar was relativity, how the gravity and time dilation on some planets was so intense that as hours were passing for them on the planet, years were passing in space. And another, science fiction story that used this concept was Ender's Game, the book, not the movie. The movie focused a lot more on action and character, while the book put a much greater emphasis on the science behind the world. And one of the things that was used repeatedly in that story was ships would be sped up to a relative speed, so that as time on the ship was passing, it was passing much faster in the rest of the universe. And they used this to prepare teachers for the children to be trained. They would put great generals and great fighters, and they would put them in ships, get them to a relative speed, and then immediately turn them around so that they would not have aged, but were still able to teach future generations directly. And this also played into the sort of structure of the war, where battles were being fought because all of the ships were slowing down from relative speeds around the same time.
So, obviously, time is a large factor in space travel. That's why in both Ender's Game and in Interstellar, the time and it takes a large role in the movie and in the book. So time is definitely a limiting factor on human spaceflight. In fact, there was a page through Cornell's astrophysics department. It's called Ask an Astronomer, and a user poses the question, could we send a crewed mission to the outer planets? Which by extension would include Jupiter's moon of Europa.
Mm-hmm.
And the conclusion of this article was that no, it probably wouldn't happen because it would take years for the spacecraft to reach there, and it would be very expensive as far as resources go, getting them there and then getting them back.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're probably not going to see any manned missions to Europa anytime soon.
Right. Technology to preserve a body for that long, it simply just isn't there yet.
Right. That doesn't mean we're not going to be exploring Europa, though.
Right. And it doesn't mean we haven't already tried to explore it.
That's right. I don't even know how many different explorations of Europa we've had so far.
So that's 1, 2, 3.
There's been a lot.
4, 5. So at least 5.
Yeah, so at least 5 different things. Most of these were just flybys. They didn't land on the planet.
They weren't exclusively trying to explore Europa. They were exploring a variety of different systems, and Europa was one they passed on the way.
Right, but like going back to 1937 with the Pioneer 10
1973.
mission. 1973 with the Pioneer mission. It didn't get a super detailed picture of Europa because it was far away. But according to Space.com, they did get they did notice some variations in the albedo or the reflectivity on the moon's surface, possibly due to the different cracks on the surface.
And this is something that would be explored by later flybys. Next, we had Pioneer 11, with the first one being Pioneer 10. In 1974, did another flyby of the Jupiter system. The spacecraft made a flyby of Europa at nearly 375,000 miles from the surface, but again, it was able to detect some of that variation in albedo on the surface.
Voyager 2, another flyby of Jupiter, showed that there were these brown stripes across the surface of Europa, which suggests some cracks in the icy surface. Earlier in the podcast, we talked about how these cracks could be potentially hosting life in the form of extremophiles, and also are potentially evidence for some sort of water plate tectonics happening on Europa.
Mm-hmm. So the next, and arguably the most influential flyby, well, wasn't even a flyby, it was an orbiter that orbited Jupiter, was the Galileo orbiter, which orbited between 1995 and 2003. Its most famous discovery at Europa was finding strong evidence of an ocean beneath the icy crust at the moon's surface. And we've talked about this ocean in depth in all of the other episodes.
Perhaps the most interesting thing about Europa.
And yeah, just in general, I think.
And so this icy moon, or this potential for an ocean, this very strong potential for ocean, is one of the reasons why we want to continue to explore it.
Right. And on the subject of continuing exploration, we've got a lot of different missions planned out for the future.
We do. So the first one coming up is the Clipper missions. And that's just going to be the spacecraft that is going to be orbiting or flying by Europa dozens of times. And it's hopefully going to be looking for evidence of these plumes of water that we think could be coming out of the surface.
Right, and we've also talked about those before in a previous episode.
Right, they were discovered potentially by some Hubble researchers.
And wasn't it also noted in the Galileo flyby at one point?
Yes, it was. I believe that the Galileo flyby did suggest that there was something venting on the surface.
Mm-hmm. So the Clipper mission will scan the surface and near subsurface to determine the thickness of the ice, and it will be looking for liquid lakes.
Right, because the hope is that if there are some lakes that are just kind of trapped in the ice, maybe we don't have to go all the way down through all the ice to the ocean. Maybe we can just drill to a lake.
Right. And it will also be measuring the moon's magnetic field,
which we said, again, was significant because that magnetic field could indicate that there is some form of tectonics going on the planet.
And it's expected to launch in the 2020s.
Yeah.
Which, all things considered, that's next year.
That's very, very soon,
if
you think about it.
It's pretty exciting.
The Clipper probe is going to have a variety of instruments. Scientists from around the country and maybe even the world basically proposed all these instruments to put on the craft, and it has been released exactly what it's going to be, what it's going to have, and it's going to have various cameras to take pictures across various different what is that word?
Regions?
Or parts of. Okay. It's going to have various cameras that will be operating across all parts of the light spectrum. It's going to have an ice penetrating radar to help look what's beneath the ice, looking for those lakes and other underwater or under ice features. It's going to have a magnetometer, which is going to be looking for
magnetic fields.
That magnetic field. And then what NASA terms a thermal instrument. I guess NASA's too fancy to have a thermometer on board.
Mm-hmm.
But in all seriousness, that's just going to look at the temperature of the planet.
They have a magnetometer, but they won't put a thermometer.
I mean, I guess like a thermometer, you have to like... This is a little bit more complicated than just a thermometer.
Yeah, but I mean, it functions the same purpose. We call it a thermometer because of what it does, not of what it is. It's...
There are other instruments, but these are the most
significant. Yeah. And there will be more missions planned if it finds a lot of interesting things.
Right, like the JUICE missions, which are also proposed for the 2020s. So the JUICE missions are looking for organic molecules. Now, these are common in the solar system.
Mm-hmm.
We can see them on various asteroids, but on Earth, they're really important for life.
Right. So on Europa, it's possible they're also important for life there.
Exactly. Now, the future explorations of Europa do depend on what the Clipper missions find. If missions discover that there's not a lot of potential for life, then obviously Europa would not be as important to NASA to explore.
Right.
But on the other hand, if they do find evidence for life, then Europa probably just became the most interesting thing in the solar system to a lot of people.
That's all we have this time, everybody. I hope you enjoyed listening. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content.
Yeah, thanks again for listening. I'm Jack.
I'm Noah.
And this has been a Europa podcast.